First, I just want to say, if you don't know me, I'm Hillary Black. I am a conversation designer and a marketer at a SMS conversational AI company. And I host small events like this just to sort of, get to know people, mentor people in our industry, and hopefully help them land their next job in conversation design. And I am joined today by Elaine. And Elaine, could you just introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, some familiar faces here, and if not, hi, I'm Elaine Anzaldo. I go by the online handle Elaine in the Bay because I live in the Bay Area and I've been here for 6 years. I'm a conversation designer. I've been working as a designer strictly for like the past 3 years. And then before that, I did like 3 years worth of contract jobs in tech, in and out of conversational AI and speech. So quite a lot of experience now under my belt. Because of my contract experience, 3 years of like constantly looking for jobs, I have become quite a bit of an expert when it comes to making resumes. And I love the topic of like resume and portfolio building. I think it's one of those things that for conversation designers, I think it's a little bit harder because we're not strictly only having like visual representations of our work. So the way that we talk about our work is very important and something that I talk about a lot. I also mentor on ADP list and private mentoring, taking a break this month just because I did come back from speaking at Unparsed, and work has been busy, but hello everyone. Oh, and for people who don't know, I'm a conversation designer at Meta working on smart classes. I'm just not representing my employer today.
Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, I feel that you and I have talked at length about hiring, how to find jobs, how to make your portfolio better, how to create a personal brand. And so there is a lot of content collaborations out there between the two of us.
Oh yeah, you should literally you guys should just like Google our names and you'll see that Hillary and I have been collaborating literally for like the past 3 years.
Yeah, we have covered like quite a range of topics. I did link below a Q&A we did last year about portfolio specifically, where we dive into a lot more questions than we will have time to answer here. But yeah, if you're wondering anything about being hired or interviewing or having a brand as a conversation designer, if you search any of those terms, you will most likely find us, which is probably how you found out about this session in the first place. So with that, let's dive into our first exercise. So if you've attended any of my sessions before, we don't typically do exercises like this, but because this is about portfolios, I want everyone to sort of get into the mindset of who this portfolio is for. So obviously this portfolio is about you, but as designers, you probably are very used to, visualizing the end user and, getting into the customer, getting into the brand persona. All of these things I think people tend to neglect a bit about their own personal website, their own work, how they are talking about themselves, how they are talking about their work. And I think that is kind of a good place to start in terms of like setting the stage of where we are going to be. So I did create a template that we can use. It is linked in the Google Doc, but I will also drop the link in the chat, and it's what is up here on the screen. If you have not used Notion before, you can just click this little button right here and duplicate the template. If you don't want to use Notion, that's totally fine too. You could just copy and paste these prompts that I have created for this exercise. And then you can just sort of dive into, answering the questions for yourself. I'm going to set a timer for us. I'm probably going to cut it a bit before the 10-minute mark because we already are behind in the session. But I just am very curious to sort of see where people want to go with something like this. So with that, I will just start our little timer. And if people want to think amongst themselves about the answers, they could be very simple. They could be very complex. It's sort of up to you of just getting into the mindset of your ideal user for your own portfolio. I will say too, if you feel like you're already overwhelmed by these questions right off the bat, maybe you're just starting out your portfolio, even if you just want to think, describe the exact job that you're looking for, the type of company that you might want to work for, the type of team, the type of product, whether you want to be working with something like Meta smart glasses or you want to be working, in SMS conversation design. Think about those types of questions and think about, is this site going to be for recruiters? Is this going to be for, people that you are reaching out to directly within your network? And how do you want those people to feel when they are viewing your portfolio? That could be for a website, or it could be for just a document, a presentation, something like that. Elaine, who would you say is your ideal person to view your portfolio?
So this is like a loaded question because I've been working as a conversation designer for 3 years, and I've actually been focusing a lot in and out of multimodal design. So I've also been working a lot on product design, UX, visual, skills. So I'm kind of thinking of transitioning over to a product design role. So when I'm thinking about these questions, I'm actually thinking about the kind of people that I hope to work with, which is like see me as a product designer versus conversation designer explicitly. And that's because a lot of my work has always been based from end-to-end product like design development. So when I think about who I want to see in my portfolio, I might want to see I hope design managers on my team realize that I am making this transition. I hope at Meta, internal teams that are hiring for product designers, they would also they would be my target audience as well. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. So I think also I really like the last question you added, Hillary, which is if a fellow designer referred me or shared my portfolio, that is literally what personal branding is. What do I want to be known for? What do I want people to say about me and how I design? So the things that I hope people say about me is that I do have visual acuity. I can do everything in UX design umbrella end to end. So that's kind of what I hope to be known for, is multimodal design.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I can definitely relate to kind of having that transition approach, or just even being considered in multiple different ways through your portfolio. In my case, I do a lot of coaching for conversation designers. I have an online course and I do that sort of speaking and educating portion. But as much as that is an aspect, and having reviews and having things like that in my website is important, it's also important that people understand that I am a designer as well and that I know what I'm talking about as far as design. So that's definitely a work in progress in terms of my own portfolio, is having better examples and more thorough case studies to show people that I kind of have design chops, as well as, being a content creator and being a marketer, which is a totally different skill set. So I have sort of a lot of identities going on within my site, but I think that that's okay too. It's important to talk about your past, your present, your future, and all aspects, and how they can be relevant to each other. How that personal branding can be relevant to yourself as a designer as well. Is anyone feeling brave enough to share one or any of their answers, or kind of how you have been approaching this exercise?
Yes, we did have Patrick, brave soul, who did volunteer.
Yeah, Patrick, would you like to talk through it, or do you want me to just read it?
Yes, I can talk
Yes.
about it. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I guess this is a tough one. It's like either you are too broad, or then you go too kind of niche, which is, I think, is fine. I guess where I'm coming from, I'm UX. I'm thinking of getting into conversation design, and then you also have product design, right? Kind of in the middle. So I guess, yeah, the way of thinking is recruiters and everyone else. And I kind of posted a good idea that I saw on someone else's portfolio. That's more kind of, I think that person's a product designer, how he addresses each person and how he works with each person. So here they kind of refer to designers, engineers, product managers. So I thought that was a good idea if someone is looking for, yeah, kind of to target the audience.
Yeah, this is very cool. I've seen in the past a similar thing from a conversation designer who had like a persona selector at the top, and then they had sort of a conversational experience for each of those personas. And I do think it is interesting to not kind of like pigeonhole yourself into one, like this is only for a recruiter who works for Amazon or something like that. It's also obviously a lot more work to create sort of 5 different versions of your site and how you talk about yourself too. Anyone else care to share before we move on?
Actually, back to your first point, Patrick, about maybe your target audience is too broad. Some exercise that I like to do is like, what would I not like to do? What kind of job do I not want to do at all? So when I started my conversation design journey, I knew I did not want to work in healthcare or like any medical conversational AI. So I specifically targeted more toward like product, whether it's like a service, B2B service that has to do more with enterprise, or it has to do more with like consumer product, people's like a running tracker, things like that. So I was more interested moving away from like a certain category. So that's also how I framed my portfolio. It's like, yes, I do have a biology degree, but I would not like to work as a conversation designer in that field.
Yeah, that's great. I think that that can also be a great tip for people who may not have existing work in conversation design and are going to be creating it, is to really think about this persona being, you know, your client or something like that, and how can you create work in those domains. Yeah, the running tracker, or, you know, Netflix. I know, Elaine, that was another one that you had before, of like, if you want to work with entertainment type of brands, create work for those types of clients that you are inventing. Or if you want to work with small businesses, or you want to work with you know, big brands or like cosmetics brands or something like that, create something that is going to be giving that person the ability to like put themselves in the shoes of your user through that shared experience. Well, this can bring us to our next section, which is just, I just wanted to take some time to sort of give people a moment to discuss or ask questions about challenges that they might be having with their portfolios, with creating it, whether it is you feel, are you being too broad, or why is no one looking at my portfolio, or things like that. If anyone has any questions, we can just take a short time to talk about that. And if no one wants to raise their hand, I can also pull questions from the existing. Okay, Victoria. Hi, Victoria.
Thank you so much. Hey, you mentioned with your portfolio that you allow it to be multiple brands, multiple areas of focus. That's something actually I really struggle with, especially in the space that we generally live in. Like, you have to be known for one thing. And I wondered if you would be willing to share a little bit more about your thought process and how you've made that work for you.
Sure. I'm the expert in not wanting to be known for one thing, I think. Not only have I done a lot currently, and am I doing a lot currently, but like everyone else here, I have a background that is in no way related directly to conversation design. I have a background in social media and marketing. And so I have already kind of had to approach knowing that I need to answer those questions of like, how did I get here? And I think that it's kind of tough, I guess, not knowing how you want to set up your website. But I do think that creating some sort of divide and letting these people know a bit more about yourself. So even having that aspect of like, here's who I am and here's how I got here. And if you want to explore more about my background in social media, or if you want to know the work that I've done in marketing for conversational AI companies, go over here. If you want to know more about my design work, go here. And then kind of get more specific just by having that like navigation is how I have approached it. I also think that you could even set up like a blog or something like that to just have the ability to categorize your different areas. But I do think that letting people see that aspect of like yourself, not necessarily like your personal life and here's who I am and I live here and this is my family, but having something just about your story and explaining to people why, for one, your background is good for what you are trying to break into, and two, just why you're passionate about it, why it matters to you, and why you are trying to sort of explore this. And you can, through the site, like link to all the different things and show how they're related. But I think for you is like narrowing down on how is it related? You answering that question for yourself and just creating this like narrative about your story, your background, and why you are, the right fit for whatever it is that you're looking for.
You.
Mm-hmm. Oops, Gabrielle. Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
good. So yeah, I have a few questions. So how I'm currently a conversation designer, so that's what I do 9 to 5, but I'm having an issue with like how can I, on most projects I work in a team and I don't want to take credit for everybody's work also. Like there's some parts of the design that I just didn't do, but I feel like if I don't tell the story from A to Z in the portfolio, then I don't know, like I don't want to take credit for other people's work, and also like the work I do sometimes it's kind of, not it's boring, but it's not flashy. I feel like it's not going to catch anyone's attention because it's just like real work for paying customers that just have so many business rules that like the end experience is not like, exciting. It's just like you're doing your thing. So I was wondering if anybody had idea on how to, did you need to create like just projects that have no connection with what you do in your daily work, or do you like adapt the work you do for your work and then make it presentable and more exciting in a portfolio, but then you didn't really do it? Just open-ended question here.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, Elaine, I would love to hear sort of how you can frame your work working within a team and just, that aspect of not taking credit for work that you didn't do, but also showing where your work fits into the bigger picture.
Yeah, I would say like my first comment, I know you mentioned something about like my work isn't flashy. If your work is in production, that's already super flashy, because I know a lot of people are actually struggling to have like real work experience in their portfolio. So like number one, it doesn't matter like what exactly is the end result, like what is your deliverable. If you have a way to like track your impact, that is like the most important thing, rather than like, is it user facing? Is it like business facing? Like, can people see it live in a website? Like, I think what really matters is that you can own your own process. And so getting into like the ownership part of your question, you have to be really explicit about what your role was, what your contribution was individually. Do not take credit for other people's work. Like, not only is the recruiter or like the hiring team like going to find out eventually, they will, like, you're going to piss off like your former coworkers. So like, just as a, be very careful when you use first person pronouns versus like the singular versus plural. Like, I did this versus we did this. And one thing that I like from UX design portfolios is that they explicitly mention their role, sometimes going into the details of like, I did have help, someone else did research for me, but I did like the prototyping part of this project. So being able to like name a task that you did, I think is what you should focus on. Also, if you have partners that you did work with, that is also a way for you to shine. Like, even though that's not your explicit contribution, you should talk about the fact that you collaborated with someone. So if you even have examples of like what the collaboration model work looked like, if it was just like 2 people versus like you were driving an entire team of like 12 plus, 20 plus, like those are details that you should be mentioning, you should be owning. Or if like someone else was driving like an effort, but you were like a subject matter expert at something, like those are terminology that you should be adopting into your portfolio and resume. Again, being very explicit about your contributions and roles. And then again, because you do currently work as a conversation designer, if there's a way that you can track, even if it's like a whole team contributed to something, if there's a way that you can like find metrics or like impact of like the work that your team did, you can also claim ownership of that. Even though if it was a joint effort, you can still claim effort. Like, overall, this led to the project success. We hit these milestones, we hit these metrics and goals. So that's a little bit about how it would work. And then more broadly, like from my own experience, I don't really have that issue because like I don't have any overlap with anyone else on my team, and that's like a little bit of the benefit of working in a consulting side like team structure. Like, I own completely, like, for example, like communications on like Ray-Ban stories. That was like a previous project, so I was able to like name explicitly what that entire domain was. Yeah, I would say like those are like my top key tips and like my gut reaction to what you said.
Thanks so much. Great feedback. I have some notes from where to start from. Thank you.
Yeah, I also will send out the recording. So if anyone is furiously taking notes, you'll be able to access the replay as well. Okay, we have a question from Adam.
Hi, I was wondering how many case studies that are conversation specific you recommend. For context, I'm trying to break into conversation design. I've got a few UX writing and UX design like hypothetical case studies, and I'm trying to figure out how many conversation design specific case studies to add to it.
Cool. I think in general, and I know like Elaine and I have talked about this in previous sessions as well, it's kind of less about the quantity and more about the quality. So I do think if you can get one very strong case study put together about conversation design or for a conversational experience, that can stand alongside your other existing design work. I also think that it kind of can depend on what types of jobs you're applying for. So if they're more like entry level and they're not requiring years of background experience, it would be more acceptable to me to see like one case study, one work example in your portfolio. But if you're applying for more senior level roles, I would think that probably like 1 to 3 would be sufficient. What about you, Elaine?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. At least one but it depends on what other case studies are in your portfolio. So if you don't have any prior examples of like UX design or design in general, then it'd be good to like focus only on conversation design if you're applying to conversation design jobs. At that point, you don't have any other case studies, net new, you should create at least two conversation design focused case studies. 3 is like, I would say, if you're overachiever, overkill, you can do 3. But for your example, Adam, you're saying you have other case studies that support the whole discipline of like, I'm a designer, like I do design. So that's why I think I lean on like at least one. So if you have one really good conversational AI focused project, and then you can leave the other 1 or 2 UX writing or like UX design focused, I think that's fine. Again, it's really for like the at least one, what that one looks like. It should be an end-to-end project, especially if you don't have work experience. And by end-to-end, that means going from like evaluation, exploration, research, going into solving, usability testing, and then finally, what were your learnings and outcomes? So that's what we mean by end-to-end.
Thanks. That's great.
Thank you, Elaine. We have a couple questions in the chat. I'm going to just go with Sarah's, and then Gabrielle, we can get to yours a bit later as well. So as far as Sarah saying that she wants to build solutions for entrepreneurs and small businesses, how can she present her work and present the value for their business? This honestly is like a kind of an easy one, because you know that they are getting value for their business by using conversational products. So you can create one that would show exactly how that is valuable. So whether you are wanting to create some sort of scheduling experience for like a hair salon or those types of businesses, or if you're wanting to create something that's more of a knowledge base that they would be able to have their business open 24/7, thinking about the problems that, whether your audience is entrepreneurs and small businesses, or it is, you know, bigger businesses that are very strict about their reputation, or if it's an industry that's very strict about regulations, how can you create that value that is specific to them? Kind of goes with the idea of having that person being able to visualize and enter into the experience that you are presenting them with. Okay, are we ready for our next exercise? This is, again, kind of more in the line of setting up your portfolio for people who already have an existing portfolio. We're going to go through and have you look at your page and kind of just like audit it to yourself. You can go back into this sort of same vision board and go through your content and just see, here's the major things that I want to do. So Adam, for example, your major thing is you're going to create a case study, and if you have an idea, you can kind of spell that out of what you're going to do. Sarah is going to create, you know, these examples for small businesses. And if you have anything that you need to kind of go in, I know like my portfolio, for example, I need to add images to my design process on like one of my case studies. So I could put that in. So if you want to just take some time to go through your existing site, if you do not have a portfolio, you can just kind of think of, you know, your first major to do is to, I would say, create a structure for how you want something like this to be. So instead of jumping right in and saying, I need to go to Squarespace and create a domain and create a brand and make all of these things, worry about the content first and then think about how you're going to present it, because that's something that you can always change and improve on later on. But the content is what is going to get you a job, not the UI. So that's something to consider for those of you who don't have a portfolio. So I will give everyone a few minutes. Yeah.
Should we quickly address the question about NDAs? Because I know like we're talking about setting up content. How do we set up content for work under NDA?
Yes, we can absolutely start that. Yeah, so let me just pop the timer and we can answer a few more of these questions, including the NDA, which I see that someone has already saying putting their case study behind a paywall. So Elaine, what do you think? I know the NDA question is one that we also answered on the portfolio session that I linked, so that can be a bit of a longer explanation. But yeah, do you have experience sharing work behind NDAs, or like what are your general thoughts about it?
Yeah, so I would say like overall the general rule of thumb is like if your work is under NDA, that probably means not just let me put it this way. The work that's under NDA is usually referring to the process because the process is proprietary. The tools might be proprietary. So it's good to kind of, if you have any visual assets or any tools, kits, like flow diagrams or anything related to the process, do not include that in your case study. What you can do instead is maybe write like a very like general summary, again listing what is your key responsibility there, what did you contribute, but not necessarily adding diagrams or adding those in between steps. If you do need to show a final outcome of the work that was under NDA, I would generally recommend doing that, like maybe a screenshot of something that's in production. Keep it behind the password. Yeah, like it was mentioned in the chat. I know there are some websites that allow you to like keep pages secret unless someone has like a specific access code. And I've seen some people keep that access code listed in their resume. So it's only the people who have their resume have access to that specific page, like that case study. So those are like the general tips. If you do feel like you need to prove yourself, like I did contribute something, I know like at least like some of the product designers that I've talked to, what they do is actually like blur out all of the work that they did. So if you feel the need to like, I need to like add something to show that I know what I'm talking about, that's another method of doing it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest, is recreating the work without having that identifying information, blurring it out, obviously not directly copying it and then applying it to like the same thing but a different brand name. But even just talking about it in like a theoretical term of, I worked for major retailer in cosmetics and I addressed these types of problems of self-serve issue resolution, and I did this type of work, versus like exactly what I did. And that's a real example of work that I personally did for a brand that I don't share about, but I could have that sort of like context given versus like the exact screenshots. So you can still share it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can still share like people, problem, context, vertical, industry, like everything can be kept summarized, like high level, but just don't get into details. Definitely don't mention proprietary tools, proprietary processes, any personally identifiable information, like any client names or any like sensitive information that like are related to like the business's users. Please omit that, redact it, or just like don't show it entirely.
Yeah, try to keep them guessing. Like one of the top 5 biggest pharmacies in the US, but you don't know which one, but one of them, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Right, thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so if that's not already on your list of case studies that you want to create, definitely add it, because don't feel that you can't share your work. And also, I think if you have a good relationship with your manager, definitely ask if you're unsure. I think just even saying like, hey, if I were to ever be talking about the work that I do, is there anything that I should not mention? And just kind of asking that question, I think is fair. I don't think that you should say, hey, I'm applying for jobs and I want to add this, but even just saying, you want to talk about your work or you want to add your work to your portfolio, and make sure that everything is okay, if you have that type of relationship with them. Another thing I want to touch on that is mentioned in this list is recommendations. I don't see these a lot in people's portfolio, but I think that they should be there. I think that it would be very helpful to recruiters and hiring managers to know what type of person you are to work with. So if you can think of any people who you've worked on a team with before, obviously previous managers that you have good relationships with, or even just fellow designers who are familiar with the quality of work that you do, maybe someone who has tested an experience for you. I think having those types of recommendations not only ready for when they are asked about in an interview of like, hey, can you give us 2 recommendations before we hire you? Knowing who those people would be, but also just having that sort of collateral on your portfolio site would go a very long way in terms of knowing what type of fit you would be on a team.
Okay, also, I just wanted to add an example of what a referral could look like. So at the end of my portfolio presentation, I actually have a hype page where I have direct quotes from team members and how I worked alongside them. So if you don't want to ask someone for a LinkedIn recommendation, you're oh, that's so heavy-handed, you can still pull out direct quotes that they might have sent in a work chat, something that doesn't describe the work exactly. And then also it's a nice detail if you are doing a portfolio walkthrough. I added it at the end of my slide deck saying okay, you heard about my work, and then here's also how other people perceive me and how I operated in the team. So that's another way you can do it as well.
I love that. Yeah, I've had to, if people are giving you a compliment for your work or for after I do sessions like this, if someone messages me feedback and I will just ask, would you mind if I put this in my portfolio? That type of thing. And yes, calling it a hype page might make you feel a bit more comfortable in terms of bragging about yourself. But people deserve to know. And I think that having these keywords as well is very interesting to think about in the context of a job posting. So a lot of times job postings will say, we're looking for someone who's a great communicator. And that is hard to show in a job that you previously did. So unless you have something like this, it's hard for them to know that you're a great communicator without speaking to you directly, which they might not get before they are interviewing you. And Sunny, to answer your question, I do think that recommendations from others that may not be conversation or UX designers are still relevant. It is still relevant to know how it is to work with you and what you're like as a person. I think that it's still valuable if it is something that in context makes sense. Obviously, if you were an actor and someone was like, they gave a great performance in this thing, that might not fit. But if it's something about working with you, if it's something about yourself as a person that fits in the context of looking for a job, I think it is relevant.
Also, feel free to prompt your recommendations or Sunny, your friends or your coworkers who you're asking feedback from. Give them some context. Say I'm applying to this role. You should be saying hit these 3 points about me. I'm a great communicator. I have great time management, or anything related to that. That's what one of my friends actually did for the job that got her hired. She gave me a list. These are your talking topics. Do not stray from this list. And that's essentially what I did.
Absolutely. Thank you guys both. Yeah, definitely good stuff for people giving you recommendations for things even as an actor, it's I have designed many conversations in acting, even I don't get the writing credit, but I've written for a lot of things. So things like that. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And yeah, for people who maybe you're involved in customer support or you're involved in training other team members, those are things that are going to be incredibly relevant to working on a team, and also very relevant to designing a conversation in many senses. So just be creative about how you approach these things. It's all getting hired a lot of times is all about how you market yourself, and it's all about how you present yourself. And so doing your best to sort of, portray yourself in the way that you definitely can see yourself and picture yourself working within the team of these people who are visiting your site. What types of things do they want to see, and what qualities of a team member do they want to have? I like these suggestions that we're getting here in the chat. So for extra work and for things, I know there's a lot of people here who may not have experience in conversation design on a job, on a team, but you still want to add work to a portfolio, and you probably have it on your to-dos to create a project and create a case study. If you have take-home assignments that you have created for interviews, expanding on that and making that bigger. I totally agree with Sujin that even if work that you have done didn't make it to production, it still is work, and it still is something that you did. So make sure that you are saving that and capturing that work, and even soliciting feedback from people that you know to give you kind of user feedback on these types of conversations are all things that you can use to piece together your own projects. And Patrick says, you can use snippets from your performance review. Yeah, I totally agree. You can definitely use those types of quotes. And I think that it's important to be able to have this type of information, especially if you have it, you need to be using it. So definitely do that. Oh, do we have a question? No? I'm not sure. We do have another question from Sarah. How complicated or simple should case studies be? And we did have a question that came in before about the important elements of a case study. So Elaine, I know that you've, talked about this kind of already, of outlining the problem, the process, and the results, but are there other things that you feel are most important to a case study?
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm unmuted.
Yes, you're unmuted.
Okay. So case studies, again, you should always have very important details, like quick overview up top. Like, what was the duration? How long did you work on this for? What was your scope, your responsibility? Like, what were you responsible for? Did you work in a team? Is this real, or is this mock information? So those general things should always be surfaced up front. The next layer would be like, what is the problem area? What's the people problem? What are you trying to solve for? Or what's the business goal? Once you have those outlined, then you can start showing like the process of like, oh, this is where I explored. Here's like some competitive analysis or whatever. Past the process, hopefully you should be testing. I think it's really good to always have like usability testing in the conversation design portfolio, because you will be responsible for that if you get hired. Especially the people who get hired in startups like I did. I was responsible for that. No one taught me how to do it, so I had to figure out how to do it. So it just shows your employer that you're ready to do the full end-to-end scope of the work, which might be doing your own research, might be doing your own usability testing, user interviews, things like that. You should also have, like, the thing about conversation design is like there might not be like a final like beautiful like visual like screen to show like this is what was the outcome. So what I always recommend is like some video of the interaction of the happy path that you want to show. So usually I would recommend putting that up top, up front, because there are people who might spend like, I don't know, 10 seconds on your case study. So you want them to see the outcome right away. Or people who want to read through the whole thing, that's what the process steps are for. One thing that I will say is that every case study on top of all of those things should also have an insights, learnings, and takeaways from it. So from this project, I learned X. Or next time I work on this project, I will do X because these things are still unaddressed. If you do have any like mock or like real user data on it, it would be a good time to say like, we iterated on the design because of this feedback. So showing that you are able to like adapt, follow a process, adapt to user feedback, like that's like the primary thing. It might sound complicated, but I think overall, let's see, like for my case study, the Netflix project, that was for my capstone course. And I would say like my case study took like maybe 2 weeks to put together, even including the user interviews and the usability testing that I ran, where I basically told people it was a real chatbot, but it was just me typing behind the keyboard. So it can be as high or low fidelity as you want.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for all of the details. I think that's super helpful. I will also link in this Google Doc, which I'll like link again in the email I send out, a few examples of case studies, like a few blog posts that kind of explain more of what this might look like, all of that type of thing. So if you're looking for more details and examples, you can expect that in email afterwards. Especially because we only have a few moments. And I want to call out too in these last couple of minutes that I put a few examples of portfolios in this doc. So one thing that we did not talk about at all yet that I do think it's very important to hit on is the UI or the design of your portfolio, because I do feel that this is sort of like the number one thing that prevents people from creating a portfolio is they think that they need to create a beautiful website and have everything be super polished in order to publish it. And I do not think that that is what you should do. I think that you should make sure like whatever is easiest for you to be able to have a place that you can just send out this work. So whether that is a PowerPoint presentation, whether that is a Notion page that has this type of information, whether it is a pretty website that has everything sort of spelled out, these can all be versions of your portfolio, but the most important thing is to summarize your work and publish it. And even if that's behind a password or if it's something that's in a PDF that you're sending out, just having that done, then you can worry about making it this beautiful special design later on. And I know, Elaine, we were talking a bit before the session started about the many different portfolios that you've had. So do you feel like you kind of have like leveled up in terms of where you started to where you are now with your portfolio, which I'll pull up right here too?
Yeah, so I have different versions of my portfolio. In the intro section as well, like right under Hillary, I have mine. I have linked an about page. So that Notion site, if you scroll down to the bottom where I have like my portfolio section, I actually walk through and talk through the different iterations of my portfolio. So it's like all the way at the bottom, Hillary.
Let's see.
After resources is portfolio. So if you guys want like the full story of like how each version tested and what I learned from it, I did do like a little summary here. So you can read through that. But basically an overview is the content really matters. So the content should always be first. Focus on your case study, then worry about the website. The website can come later. You can like automate it or like outsource it like on Notion, just like dump your stuff in there. I would highly recommend that. In terms of like entry-level positions, for better or for worse, conversation designers are not evaluated for their visual prowess. So no employer expects you to have a beautiful website. Like straight up, you could just use Notion. You can use like Google Slides. That's it. once you start moving past the entry level though, and you want to be hired at a company, so you're not building your own business, you're not at your own startup, for people who are joining like companies as a more senior designer, you should have a portfolio presentation in a deck form. And I say that because most companies at a senior level require you to talk through your entire process, not just show it. So portfolio version 3 is technically still my real portfolio, which is a slide deck. It's like a whole walkthrough of like who I am as a person, what are my design strengths, what's my background, what are the projects that I worked on and shipped, and then finally like my hype page that I showed everyone. So that's still version 3. I haven't changed it because I've been at the same job for like 2 years. And then portfolio version 5, I say it's portfolio version 4 for fun. I say it that way because I needed a place to like show that I'm working on smart glasses, because my version 3 does not say that anywhere. So I really wanted to make like a public one just to kind of like brag about like the product that has been so successful that I contributed to. So that's what I mean by like I have different versions of my portfolio. They have different purposes. If I did need to apply for new jobs, I would still use my slide deck format. But you know, portfolio 4 would be potentially if I ever wanted to collaborate with like a company who wanted to like do a community event or like a workshop or anything, which I have in the past, I would show the website rather than my slide deck. So it just, yeah, different purposes, also different content. So yeah, like that's it. That's my brain dump. I can't really think of anything else. But if there are any questions about it, please read through like the Notion doc.
Yeah, and absolutely. I know we're running out of time here. So first, I want to say thank you to Elaine for answering all of these questions and for being here with all of us today. And also just, yeah, if you have further questions, if you're looking for more inspiration, this site here that Elaine has linked to has a lot of different resources, even things like, say, getting hired in conversation design. I also want to call out Convofolios, which Elaine has created, which is a collection of conversation designer portfolios. So if you were looking for inspiration, this would absolutely be a place to go to. If you have a portfolio and you would like to submit yours to this, you can do so on the site as well. And I think keeping in mind, yes, it can be a beautiful website like Elaine's. It can be, these are a few I didn't get to share, but it can be a Notion document like Joseph, who is another conversation designer. I had even created a sort of like resume, like calling card on Notion. Notion has, I linked in this doc, 67 different design portfolio templates. So if you're looking for a starting point, I would absolutely recommend that. But the more that you go in depth, you can look through the rest of the conversation design portfolios to sort of get some more inspiration. And yeah, I hope that everyone had a great time today. I was afraid that we would run out of time, and we did, as we always do, but I think that is just showing how passionate we all are about portfolios and how much really we can do when it comes to portfolios. So I'm so excited to see just like where everyone takes it. And I would love if you can kind of share your links to your portfolio with us once you've completed it. I'm loving all of the reactions here.
The reactions. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Yeah, thanks so much. And yeah, if anyone would like to connect, we have all of our links here. I'll be adding all of you. And I will be hosting a LinkedIn specific session similar to this one in 2 weeks. So I hope that I can see all of you there, and that can be sort of a timeline for you to start working on your portfolio, and then we will gather again next month to get feedback on anything that you want feedback on. So I hope to see you all soon, and thanks again so much for tuning in.